go from beginner to, big brain HTMX developer.
Oh,
And
cool.
like, let's jump into the code. Again, I'm using ASP.NET Core, but whatever backend you want to use or anybody else wants to use, they're welcome to use that. But let's go to Rider and we'll see. When folks download this project, they're going to notice a couple C# ASP.NET Core projects in the solution. This Jet Swag store we'll look at later, but this is kind of a complete sample using everything you learn from the exercises in this project. But the first thing we're going to start with, it's kind of an obligatory thing. You have to have a Hello World example. So
By the way, your IDE looks good. Is this the default Rider theme?
Oh yeah. Everyone always asks.
People always ask that question. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, go on.
Yeah, everyone always asks. The nice thing is, let's see. Yep, this is Rider Dark. If you're coming from WebStorm, Darkula's here.
Yeah.
Also, if you have WebStorm users, the Rider theme pack is available in the plugin store. So you can have the Rider experience even if you're not using Rider. It's kind of nice. But yeah.
That's nice.
So this is our Hello World sample, and I'm looking at the completed sample here. When you download this project, there's actually two versions of the exercises, one that's completed with the solution, and another one that kind of lets you fill in your own solution. If, when my HTMX course comes out, people can follow along through the start exercise. But let's walk through the Hello World sample and kind of show what we were looking at on the website in action. So actually, give me a second here. Let us start the sample and we can look at it side by side. So this is our Hello World example here on the left. This is actually Razor syntax. So anyone who's not familiar with ASP.NET Core, we have a view engine called Razor. And what Razor is, it's a combination of HTML and C#. It allows you to do some interesting things. One of those things is actually you can create your own tags. And in this sample, I actually have a markdown tag that allows me to, render markdown onto the page. So it looks like HTML, but its looks can be deceiving in this case. We can see here on the right-hand side, there's a goal that we have in mind. We want to be able to click this button and we want to change the text that says change me, right? So the way to do that is the first thing we do is we pick our HTTP method. In this case, we want to make a GET request, right? So when someone clicks this button, we want to make a GET request, and then the target, we call the server, it's going to return an HTML snippet. Where do we want to put that HTML snippet? Well, that's what hx target is about. And this takes a CSS selector. So up here, if we look up, our header tag, the h2, has an identifier, an ID of target. Yep. So, do you want me to click the button?
Yeah. Let's see.
All right, let's click it. Do you believe? Do you have faith, Ebenezer, or?
Oh, well, I'm looking at line 32 right now, and I'm seeing that we're trying to make a GET request to, like, that's an empty string. Is that gonna have any impact on what we're trying to do?
Okay, let me click it and then I'll explain to you.
Oh. Yeah.
Why that's empty. Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So that worked.
That worked, right?
Yeah.
So why did I leave get empty here? Well, in the case of most in the case of most method calls in HTML, if a value is left empty, it's basically shorthand for saying, hey, call the same endpoint / page that I'm currently on. So this is basically like saying having this route in here without needing to type it, right?
Why do we need to call it though? If we take out line 32, is our application still gonna work? The click me button.
Well, it's not going to work, right? Because if you think about it, we still need to tell Htmx, hey, what type of method do we want to call the server with? In this case, we still need to say, hey, it's a GET request, right?
Okay.
So
yeah,
we talked about Htmx needing some kind of backend service. Would you like to see the backend?
just 1 second before that, let me be clear on this. Click on the button again, the click me button. Where are we getting oh, I think that's what you want to show me right now, where we're getting hello world from, right?
Exactly. So we're getting it from the back end. If I open, so again, this is depending on your technology stack of choice, but this is Razor Pages with ASP.NET Core. There's typically a what we call a code behind. In this case, if I hide this, this is what we call the page model. This page model handles requests, and you can see that I have an onGet method. Let me let me bring this up larger. So when a request comes in, I'm using a NuGet package that I wrote to determine if the request coming in is performed by HTMX. If it is performed by HTMX, I end up returning this HTML snippet here as content. So yeah, we return this snippet. I'm also using a nice little language injection feature here. So I'm saying, hey, this snippet is HTML, and Writer recognizes that as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's a nice feature, yeah.
So if the request isn't performed by HTMX, say a regular page load, like somebody navigated to this page, just go ahead and render the page like you normally would, right? So
I get that now, yeah.
So you can actually see this in action. If we open up the DevTools here, I'm going to click this, and we're going to see a request come through. Let me zoom in so we can see it. DevTools. Let me shrink this. But you can see the response on the request is just that span that we can see here.
Hello world, yeah.
Inside.
Yeah. What's the text that's after hello world? After the comma, we have text there.
Oh, yeah. So this is another part of ASP.NET Core. When you return this content, when you call this content method, which returns a content result, you need to specify the content type. So in this case, I could be explicit and just say content type, right?
Oh, okay.
So in theory, this could be, like text CSV or, but
this is like this reminds me of making the JSON request too, where we have to specify the content type.
Yeah, so like that's kind of how you do it with ASP.NET Core. JSON is pretty common, so you can also return just JSON. Ooh, JSON. Oh, this is a Razor page. So traditionally, if you're using MVC, you could do that, but you can do that here as well. But okay, so let's move to a more complex demo, right? Like this is kind of a toy right now, right? Are you impressed?
I am. I am actually. We've done our first. I feel like I know Htmx already. We've done our first hello world click me button interaction where we were able to send a request, get HTML data, and put that in our website. I'm impressed.
Yeah, and that's really the entirety of HTMX, right? Like it's more about the strategy of how do you break your page down so that you can think about functionality that way. But the actual mechanics of HTMX are really, really straightforward and simple. And I think really anyone can kind of grasp at least the basics of HTMX. So let's move to a more complex demo. Let's move on to our second example here. This is about managing state. And I'll actually go to the code as well here so we can see it. And just like our previous example, we have our Razor page, which has HTML in it. And we're using a different HTTP method this time. And we have a target down here that we're going to increment as we click the button. And yeah, let's look at the back end before we kind of just start clicking and see what happens. Yeah, so here's our page model, which is kind of what's holding the state of our page. And I have this static variable of count. Full disclaimer, a lot of these demos shouldn't be deployed to production. They'll work for you on your local machine, but this isn't production code. This is obviously demo code. So we have a static count variable here. This will actually maintain our state for the page. And every time we reload the page, it's just going to set the count back to 0, right? That way we can kind of create a reproducible demo. And then every time we click this button, we're going to post to the page and we're going to increment the count by 1, right? And then again, here you see we're returning it as text HTML.
Okay. So this is like, since a lot, I can say that like probably literally all the work happens in the backend. So would you recommend, like what you just did right here, having both the backend and the front end in one code base when working with HTMX?
Yeah, I mean, I would like the whole point of HTMX is to kind of like help bridge the gap that's kind of formed between front end and back end, and to help you build applications that maybe are easier to maintain over the long run. Whether that's true or not, I think that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but I think that's the spirit of HTMX. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
That makes sense.
You ready? You ready to count some numbers,
Yeah.
Ebenezer?
Let's try that.
All right. All right. We got one. How about another?
So that's working.
Another one. I'm channeling DJ Khaled. Another one.
And that fits well with your name, by the way. Yeah, that's true. So this works well. Okay, what do you want? What do you want to like persist this data? Let's say in the browser's local storage or IndexedDB. I want to reload my page and still see 6.
Yeah, so this is the interesting part, right? So if you want to save state, there's a lot of backend database systems that you probably should store state in. So if you're in the Microsoft world or the .NET world, you're probably going to be using something like Microsoft SQL Server. That's likely where you want to manage a user's state. If you're in the open source world, maybe something like Postgres or MySQL for the backend would be great. Those are great options. You could also go use Firebase as well. So those kind of things, if you're interested. For client side, if you want to maintain the state of the page client side so that it's just for the user, you're going to have to write that local DB access using JavaScript. So,
okay.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things to bring up about HTMX. Just because you're using HTMX doesn't mean you have to abandon JavaScript completely, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like accessing local storage and caching things client side, using IndexedDB and stuff like that. Yeah, you still want to use JavaScript for those things and interact with HTMX that way. So,
Yeah, so it's same way we would call functions in HTML. That's the way we can call them in HTMX, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so you
Yeah,
want
that makes sense. I mean, if I were as a JavaScript developer, if I wanted to use HTMX, I'm gonna still be using Node.js on the backend, so it's still JavaScript.
mm-hmm. What is the what's the most popular database in the Node.js world? I don't know.
That should be Post. As far as I know, for SQL is Postgres, and then for NoSQL is MongoDB. As far as I know, but a lot of people have different preferences, though.
Yeah, so use those databases and take full advantage of them. I think especially when you compare what those databases can do, things like full text search and indexing based on particular fields and things like that. Those databases are just going to be way more robust than what you can do in local storage, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
okay, you want to move to the next demo?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
All right. So here in my next demo, and by the way, we'll just do this demo, and then folks can check out the rest of the samples if they're interested. So the next demo, this is something a lot of folks want to add because it creates a great client-side experience. And it helps users get to information faster and kind of navigate an app easier, it's typically type ahead search, right? Everyone's seen this, whether you've seen it on Amazon, whether you've seen it on Google. You start typing and things start to happen as you type.
Yeah.
Right. We have a table here. I'm gonna stretch this out so people can see it a little better, but we have a table here filled with retro video games. Everybody loves video games, right? So if you start typing, you can see that we're filtering data based on what I type. So if you're a Nintendo fanboy, you can see all the games published and created by Nintendo. If you're more of a Sega person, you can type Sega, and you can see we have Sonic the Hedgehog, Outrun, and one of my personal favorites, Streets of Rage. So do you want to see how this is implemented?
Sure.
What exactly is the sandbox then?
It's a 3D metaverse. The building blocks are voxels, which...
Sure. Very interested. I want to see how I've been suffering for years.
Your suffering ends today, my man. So we have an input here. This is the Razor side of the equation, right? We have again, we have ASP.NET Core Razor syntax here, and we're binding to this element called query. It's a property.
Okay.
If we actually head back, let's type Sonic. You can actually see the query is replaced in the header here, so you can actually see it in the bar. If we this is another nice feature, and I'll show you how it's done, but if I refresh the page, you can see that the query string is still there, but my page loads with the initial result set, right?
Yeah. So we can even directly edit Sonic there to Sega or any other thing we want in the URL bar.
Yeah, this is a great feature because in a way you can share this link with somebody and you've managed to maintain state, right?
Yeah.
The other nice side effect of this is if you're building, say, like a shopping site that needs to be scanned by a bunch of crawlers, your links all still work. They're not dependent fully on the client-side experience, which is nice.
Okay. That's true.
Okay, let's head back. So we have our query. You saw that was being passed in the URL. I've turned off autocomplete because it's just annoying, and your viewers don't need to see my search history. That's so again, we have the hx get, which we want to make a get request. And here we're using ASP.NET Core Razor again to generate a link, right? So maybe to explain this to folks who are not familiar with the ASP.NET Core, we have this thing called a URL helper, and we can actually ask it, this is a page, we want to generate a link specifically to this page. So typically in an ASP.NET Core app, we have a bunch of pages and endpoints and controllers, and we may decide to change those routes over time. So rather than trying to hard code a URL in here, you know, like, which can be like, it can break as you kind of reorganize your application. It's easier to ask the registered routes, hey, give me what link this thing has in the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
I'm sure other backend systems also have link generation built into them, so it's very similar to that. Again, we have our target. Our target is going to be our body down here. I'll show you that then, because I think this is where it starts to get really, really interesting for folks. And we talked about triggers, right? We've talked about clicking things. We've talked about changing the input. But here we actually have a custom trigger. This says, hey, on key up, trigger the changed event, but only do it after 250 milliseconds when nothing else has occurred, right?
So that's like the bouncing.
Exactly. Yep, you got it. We also have a loading indicator. The truth is this isn't necessary because it happens so fast, but there's a fun little Pac-Man image here that will kind of chomp away if the search takes too long. But yeah, that's really it. Like these 4 elements, and we've implemented type ahead search. Let's go look at the results. So again, we're still in the back end and we're still doing Razor. And whatever the search results are, as long as we have results, this is kind of what this syntax means. We go through and we loop through all the games and we just render the row elements like HTML. So by the way, this @ here is like, it's a specific symbol for Razor. Anytime you see this is you're transitioning from HTML over into C#.
Just like having, just like wrapping JavaScript in braces when you're writing JSX
exactly.
code for like React.
Exactly. You got it. So yeah, like this is kind of what's being rendered on the server. Let's look at the C# because C# is just as simple. Again, we have our database on the server. We have our query string that gets bound every time somebody sends a request. So here's our query. And then we just filter the list. So given, if we have a query, given our list of games, we just say, hey, does this query, is it contained within any of the games in our list? And then we get a bunch of results back and we return that result set back. By the way, this is another neat thing about Htmx. It looks at response headers. So you can do things like, in this case, I'm pushing each query into the history of the browser, the client-side browser. So every time a request completes, we actually change the history in the browser to reflect the new query, right? Does that make sense?
And then if we hit the back button, we can go to the previous request, right?
Exactly. Yep. Man, you're turning into an HTMX expert. I love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna start building SaaS with HTMX after this video.
So here's where it gets interesting, right? Like in all the other previous examples, I was building HTML in C# code, But if you're using ASP.NET Core, you can actually lean on the view engine. So if someone is using Express or Django, they might want to lean on their view engine. And in this case, I'm rendering a partial. And the partial in this case is this underscore results that we saw over here. Right?
Okay.
So when we initially load the page, we're also using that partial to render the initial page load. And this is kind of the strength of Htmx for me, is like you can use your partials both for initial page loads and subsequent like HTMX requests. And the logic doesn't, like the logic isn't any different in your partials, whether it's an HTMX request or whether it's the initial page load. There's nothing in here that's unique to HTMX. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
I mean, what are your thoughts as someone who does JavaScript? Like, what's your feeling about, like, technically there's no difference between client side and server side because it's just HTML.
That's going to take some getting used to, like a mind shift from the way we've been doing things. But I think that once, like if I get used to it, then it's going to be easier for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you'll also find like you can spend more of your time developing like functionality on the back end and then exposing it. I have a sample that folks can go check out. We're probably not going to do it in this video because it would put this video over like 5 hours at this point.
Yeah.
But for folks who are interested, they can check out a validation sample where the validation happens server side, but it looks like a client side experience. I think that's a cool demo. So if folks are interested in that, they should just definitely check out the GitHub repo to see that sample in action.
Well, that was incredible. You know, we had a lot of technical issues when recording this. At a point, my memory card got full, so my camera stopped recording. Kali's camera got frozen, but we were still able to give you good HTMX content. And I'm sure you learned a lot because I learned a lot. I feel like an HTMX expert right now. But let me know in the comment section below. Do you want to see more HTMX content from us? Do you want us to give you the part we recorded that we couldn't add to the video because it became so long? Let me know in the comment section below. I want to know your thought on HTMX. What do you think about HTMX? Do you want to start using HTMX today? Do you want to see more HTMX content? Let us know. See you by next video. Bye.